Sonia Richardson. And Sonia, as well as being co-president of PWN, is also a partner in Spark Strategy Consulting. We're also even more delighted because we have Marie-Christine Mahez with us as well. Marie-Christine is a former president of Paris branch of PWN and is an engineer, head of business development in a startup transport company, and she's a coordinator of a think tank called the Observatory of Gender Balance, which has some very impressive and important people on it, I believe. And they published yesterday 6 gender balance initiatives that really work. And I think Marie-Christine will be delighted to tell you a bit more about that shortly. She's also the director on the book of my Bible. Have you got a copy there? It's an absolutely amazing book, which when I first came across it, changed my life. It's Gender Balance When Men Step Up. And it was originally produced by in Paris here, and then wonderfully translated into English for people like me. And it's an essential read, believe me. We'll tell you more about that later as well. Thank you, Marie-Christine. So what we'd like to do, if you're okay with this, is have 3 short introductory sessions to really sort of set the scene for gender balanced leadership. And then we'd like to hear from you, because we think there's a lot you know about this and a lot you can contribute, and we'd really like to get your ideas. So we're going to manage time ferociously, because we've only got 40 minutes, and we need your help with that, but that's our plan. So is everyone okay with the plan? Does it sound okay? All right. Now, can anyone remember the 3 words that we were all encouraged to be at the beginning of Women's Forum? Daring, impact, engage. Fabulous. Okay. So as you're listening to what we're talking about, and as we're having our discussion, be thinking about, how can I dare? What impact can I have? How am I going to engage? And we want to end really with a call to action, because unless we all go out of here and do something different, nothing's going to change, or it will change much more slowly. So with that, and by the way, I was told if anyone wants to do any social mediaing, there's a hashtag there, one of them anyway. I'm sure I'll get Sonia and Marie-Christine to put theirs up as well, and you can all follow us on Twitter. But without any more ado, what we wanted to talk about was what we're doing here, okay? Now, here's a picture from my life. Can anybody spot the odd person out in this photograph? You might see a man at the back there, and that's PWN Global. That's the women's network that I'm on the board of. This picture was taken last week in Oslo, where we had our president's offsite, and you'll find Cecile in the picture there as well, in the red. And we had an amazing time, but it's an amazing network. And I thought for just a couple of moments, I'd pass over to my fellow co-president to say a few words about PWN Global, because that's behind a lot of the thinking that we've done on gender balanced leadership. Sonia.
Thanks, Rob. So just very briefly, and for those of you who were in the session yesterday on networks, I see a few familiar faces. You will have already heard me speak about PWN Global. PWN stands for Professional Women's Network. It has a very long heritage, particularly here in Paris, where it was originally founded. And we are now a network, a global network of 29 city networks across the globe. Primarily, though, in Europe, because that's where our legacy is. And we have about a community of about 40,000 people, so who are really connected with what we do. And what we do, basically, is we do all that we can to help advance gender-balanced leadership. That's mostly what we concentrate on. And the way we do that within our city networks is by bringing people together. So people like yourselves coming together at events where you can learn, share, connect, and really do, the things that help support other women, but also help support accelerating that road to gender-balanced leadership.
Thanks, Sonia. And 4 years ago, PWN invited me to join the board. I was the only man on the board, which was a pretty interesting and scary experience. Happy to tell you more about that and the interesting journey. But that's, to some extent, how I've managed to understand much more about the real issues and why I've been so passionate about getting more men engaged in this whole topic. So those of you that were here yesterday and heard Gilles Babinet from the European Commission talking about what's going on in our world these days, you won't need any reminding from me that we're in an era of disruption, or some call it a VUCA world, where it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But there's no doubt there's huge change going on. And what he said yesterday, I thought really resonated. If we want to be disruptive, he's saying the most disruptive companies are those that are the most diverse. And I think we really need to take that to heart when we're thinking about leadership as well. Because if those companies are going to be successful, their leadership needs to be diverse, and it needs to flow down through the whole organization. So what is gender balanced leadership? Well, in some senses, it's about the proportion of women in leadership. You know, how many women do we have at the top? I mean, globally, the figure's about 20% of executive positions are held by women, which is a scandalously low number. And of course, we don't have a huge number of women in the pipeline as well coming through to make that number bigger. They reckoned at the World Economic Forum, it would take 117 years to close the gender gap. That's how slowly things were progressing. And of course, we want to see an equal proportion of women and an equal proportion in the pipeline. We want to see equal pay for the work that's being done. But it's also about the leadership culture. How do we have a culture that's more balanced? A lot of cultures in leadership have been very dominated by men and typical sort of alpha male, macho type kind of cultures that have been developed. How do we change those cultures as women come into them and as we want to achieve more balance? And then leadership competencies. How do we create a world where the competencies we expect of our leaders going forward are more balanced? Yes, we need decision making, we need lots of positive things, but we also need balance as well in that. So we'll hear more about that as well. And this is one of the models. We were talking yesterday in one of the sessions here about leadership, and what kind of leaders do we want to see in the future? And this is a model of leadership that's been developed by a lady called Monique Talon in California, and I've been working on a project with her. And I stole her, with her permission, her logo, her diagram here. And you can see that what we're saying is that leaders of the future need to have vision, for sure, but they also need to be prepared to be vulnerable, to be humble, to collaborate, to care, to have empathy and intuition. And if that's our picture of leaders of tomorrow, then I think women are extremely well placed to have a bigger place in leadership. And in fact, as men, we'll be trying to catch up, really, to develop some of those competencies and skills if we can. Sonia.
So thanks, Rob. And just to be very clear, I mean, we could talk for 40 minutes, which is the time slot we have, about how we believe that we should inspire women to be bolder and to dare more and to be, you know, audacious in the way that they act. But what we've chosen to do within PWN Global is really talk about how do we engage men. So therefore, with your permission, we would like to spend most of our time this afternoon talking about specifically that. How do you engage men? I think, you know, just looking at the statistics, there is something about let's focus on accelerating the change. And we believe that you do that by engaging men. Now, there's a nice slide up of a man and a woman on a... what do you call these things? A seesaw, thank you. But above it says, I think it says it all, you know, men are part of the problem, so therefore they need to be part of the solution. Now, I just took some notes this morning and from the session yesterday, and I think we would all agree that it's not easy to engage men. You know, there are some men who are very much out there. Rob is an example of that, but we also saw Michel Landel this morning. I personally know lots of men who would agree with me, but actually then don't take any action. And, you know, it is very much around how do we engage that group. And so just some statistics that came to me, and I was like, oh, God, really? From the McKinsey report as an example. And I think we will probably also all recognize that men are growing increasingly wary of this topic, this theme. There's tiredness around it, there's frustration around it, but more importantly, there's real kind of negative feelings around it as well. So men feeling discriminated. A financial services study here in France said that 1 out of 10 feel that they're treated less favorably because of gender balance or diversity programs. So there's something there that really tells us we need to focus on the message and get that right and really engage. So for those of you who were in this morning and heard Georges Deveau from McKinsey speak, who heard him speak this morning on the kind of the 10 commandments? Not all of us. So just to reiterate a message that he came up with, and that's also part of the McKinsey report, 28% of men are unaware of that women would have difficulties getting to the top. 28%, so that's 1 out of 4, right? What he didn't mention, that of that 28%, 66 feel that diversity programs or programs to help accelerate female leadership, 66 of those 28% feel that the programs are unfair to them. Okay, so people are unaware, and of the programs, they feel that they are being discriminated, basically. What George didn't say this morning, and I am speaking here also as a McKinsey alum, so I do like to look at numbers and statistics. What he didn't say, and I think it's also relevant, because if 28% are unaware, a lot more are aware, right? But of the 68% who say that they're aware, 49% believes that diversity programs are unfair. I think that actually gives us real insight into where men generally are and what it requires us all to do to help advance this conversation, this dialogue, this effort into creating a gender-balanced world. So it is very much around collective engagement, and that is what we try to focus on within PWN. What is the story? Well, if it's about men, I think most of the men that I know and I work with, they're not openly against it, but they don't see it. So it's this concept of male privilege that Michael Kimmel speaks about a lot. They don't see that there's an issue. There's a lot of unconscious bias, and that unconscious bias leads to the fact that women get less positive evaluations. That there is mansplaining. For those of you who were in the session yesterday about women networks, you will remember me saying in my little group, isn't it interesting? We're sitting here with a group, and there are 3 men in the room. How come the 3 men in this room were the first to speak? And how come then, when things are being said, there is that thing of mansplaining? And we know about that women don't get invited to social events. I was speaking to somebody this morning, and they said, I was literally, as an only woman, standing amongst a group of CEOs. Nobody thought to invite me. Nobody thought to invite me. I didn't step in and just introduce myself, but nobody thought to invite me. So I think this concept of social events, we see it, we experience it. Also, the use of the word girls. Who's been called a girl in their workplace or has been referred to as a girl? Oh, those girls. Even over 45. Yeah. So, that is such a stigma. All of the stereotyping, but also the microaggressions. Rob actually, within his role as senior partner with Mercer, has done a lot of work on creating empathy with people to understand what kind of microaggressions women get on a daily basis. So what do we hear on a daily basis? And the men, right, from the work that you've been doing, it's quite staggering, right? That they like, wow.
They're shocked when it's played back to them. We use virtual reality. When we get them to put the specs on and see this from a woman's perspective, they go, oh my God.
Yeah. So there's great things there, but I do also believe that we need to focus on the fact that there is this stereotyping, there are less promotions, less development opportunities. INSEAD is a partner with us. They are literally struggling to get women into the executive programs. Not necessarily because the women don't want to take part in executive programs. They might not dare to step up and do it, or there might be some different reasons why, but mostly because these women in their workplace are not seen as the person that needs to be developed. So all of that. So if that's a starting point, how do we make sure that we do engage men? And what is in it for the men? So Marie-Christine will be talking a bit more about the business case. What I would like to really focus on, how do you get men committed from a personal perspective? So what's in it for them? Now, this is a piece of research that's been done in Australia, and for some of you, you might know that Australia is quite developed in this thinking. I was speaking to somebody yesterday from Australia and said, but hey, you had quite a way to go, right? And yes, they did. But there's therefore been a lot of really great work. And what they found in this piece of research is that men who are committed actually have better relationships. stronger relationships. So there's a direct win. You know, your relationship will be improved if you really commit to having a gender balanced world. What about the health? Men who are committed find that they are healthier. Why? Because they can drop this atlas burden. My God, I sometimes walk around the world thinking to myself, how tough must it be to be a man, to have to carry all of that stuff around? Thinking about what am I going to teach my son about that? So there's a direct correlation to men and health issues simply because of the burden that they carry along. So richer friendships, who wouldn't choose for that? But I think more importantly, the more room for emotions. There are so many men out there who, when they do get an opportunity, and I think, Rob, you'll also be able to allude to the men's network within Mercer on that one, but when they do get an opportunity to just say, look, I'm scared, I don't know, it's taking away the stigmas that they were raised with. So more room for emotions. Fulfilling parenting, we had somebody yesterday who was here joining the Women's Forum, has just had a baby 4 months ago, and her husband wheeled in the baby so that she could breastfeed her little baby here at the Women's Forum. Those are the kind of models that we should be seeing. The guys who do step up. Rob referred to being in Oslo a week ago. Go around the Scandinavian countries and see what the men do there. It's inspiring. So higher quality of work, I think we know about that. More innovative teams, we also know about that. This is the business case. What does not go into a McKinsey report is that there is greater sexual satisfaction. If there's one thing Rob said to me, you actually need to just have that one on the screen and forget about all the rest. If there's one thing that would inspire the guys, if you run out of arguments, you might just want to throw in that one. Important, it is a conscious act. For any man, it is a conscious act. So let's not expect it to be unconscious. It's going from unconsciously unskilled to consciously unskilled. And let's help them from there, because it's not conscious as where we stand now. I would like to see everyone go out of this room and do as we all do and really ask for sponsoring and ask for mentoring and have these conversations, because we're pretty inspired actually by the outcome when we do have these conversations.
And Sonia, I'd also add, invite a man, you to sponsor them. So I'm being reverse mentored, for example, by a woman. It's a fabulous experience, really opened my eyes. So it's a two-way street, I think, on that. We can learn a lot from being reverse mentored.
Absolutely, and which is also something that we do within PWN. So in our network, we have a full mentoring program. Increasingly, we are actually getting men to be mentored. So, but anyway, would be more than happy to go into all sorts of detail about PWN after the session, so come up and speak with us. So how do we get men involved? First, we help redefine success. If we don't redefine success and what success looks like, we'll stay in the world that we are. Then, if you are a leader, I think we've seen enough of those on the stages here, but do speak out. If you are a leader of your organization, speak out. If you're a people manager, really develop that talent, and I think we've heard lots of ways to do that, whether it's on the recruiting end, on the retention end, on the succession end. Really focus on how you develop your talent. If you're a colleague and you're a committed man, or if you're a woman asking for a man to be engaged, get them to really give you the credit as a woman for a great idea. Don't let them kind of run away with it, but engage them in that conversation that they are supportive. And more importantly, partners at home, it is very much about balancing those roles. It all makes perfect sense, right? But we all realize it's pretty hard to do. But be specific in the actions you ask, and I think you can go a long way. Now, before I close off and give the mic to Marie-Christine here, there is one thing that I'd like to add. Because we are all talking about engaging men and have been doing so at PWN for the past 4 or 5 years now, and you're hearing it increasingly on the stages, the platforms, the events everywhere. What we need to make sure is two things. One, let's not put the man that's engaged on the pedestal. I like this quote. Once you do put someone up on a pedestal, he is immediately looking down at you. So make them equal partners in whatever you do, and make sure that they are really working for gender balanced leadership. And the other thing is, make sure that those women's voices are heard. So do inspire women to speak up and raise their voices and make themselves heard, for both men and women. But I think those are the two kind of things that to keep in mind whenever you do is start engaging men. That's from me for now. Marie-Christine.
Thank you, Sonia.
Oops. There you go.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Sonia and Rob. This book that we wrote some time ago, the idea, the reason for that was, I mean, two simple ideas. 83 to 90% of the executive positions in the Western world are held by men. So obviously, men are the ones that need to be convinced. And we are not making progress in gender balance apart from the boards. We all know that in the executive committees in particular, the numbers are moving really, really slowly. So we thought, let's build a toolbox, and so the content of that and what we are working on since then is trying to analyze what the men need to know to be comfortable with gender balance and be committed, what prevents them from engaging into gender balance, and what are the solutions. And the reason why we have decided today to talk about the CEOs that we've interviewed is that in what we found out during doing this work is that there are three main barriers between men and engaging into gender balance. Those three barriers are fear, ignorance, and apathy. Fear of not finding the right words to talk about gender balance, or fear of looking ridiculous, fear of losing your status because you're engaging into something that is not necessarily very sexy. So it's fear first. Then ignorance. I think you mentioned that Women Matter study where 28% of men don't realize that women are having difficulties to break the glass ceilings. And when you ask, most men actually ignore, so it's not bad will, it's just looking after other things than gender balance, and at the end of the day, they totally ignore all numbers, so they need to be informed. And finally, apathy because men don't necessarily see what they are going to gain as an individual, so you need to explain to them. So the reason why we had those interviews is that when talking about fear, one thing that helps a lot men to engage is to see other men engaging. And so it's not only to find out what those gentlemen thought about gender balance, but it's really to show other men the examples of committed men at a very high position, obviously. So what we found out in those interviews, in those 12 interviews, is that there's often a personal story behind a committed man. So there are different types of personal stories. Some of those men have been raised by women only, for example, where the dad, for some reason, was absent. Some others had women as a mentor in their professional life, in their early professional life. Some others, there's one example of this CEO who was raised by a mother who was not allowed to make study. She wanted to be a doctor, and her parents had decided that the boys would study and not the girls. So there were 3 boys, 3 girls, and only the 3 boys studied. And he had all his life his mother, who was, so disappointed about that. So he had a sense of unfairness all his life. So that, as I said, there's often a personal story behind the the engagement of a man. But of course, we don't want to wait for every man, every CEO, every manager to have a personal story to engage. We want them to engage because they have to and because it's fair. So we need to find the right arguments. And you can see here in the summaries that the CEOs, or we took a quote that to us is really a symbol of the talk that we had with them. And you can see also that there are 3 types of arguments that are used. So first, the performance argument. I think we all agree that we need to correlate or to demonstrate the correlation between performance, company performance, and gender balance. But this is not always an argument that works. There are companies which work really well. They have wonderful results, wonderful growth, and they go very well without gender balance. So those type of companies, you need to find another argument than performance. And the other arguments that are used, there are 2 of them. One is that a company, by definition, has a CSR mission. So by this CSR mission, you have to have balanced team. You have to be welcoming, and you have to welcome diversity. And the third argument after performance and CSR mission is just ethic, fairness, and heart. Why not? I like to see that Henri Decastre, who is the former CEO of AXA, the company assurance here in France and abroad, doesn't like to use the performance argument because he thinks that we shouldn't be talking about performance when we talk about gender balance, because what's more important than that is fairness. Gender balance is just a matter of fairness. So, and the other, let me talk to you briefly, and that there are five other ideas that the CEOs told us about during those interviews. The first one is how gender balance is a lever for accelerated and better organizational changes. Having gender balance organization is a way to get rid of outdated working habits, and it's also a way to challenge the usual way of doing business. And you see here some of the quotes. We cannot. The one that I like very much is, "We cannot move forward with a monochrome workforce." The second idea is that they believe that gender balance is a lever for more efficient decision making. So that's an argument that we see often, and this is something that we talked a lot about. It's by taking into account multiple viewpoints and by assessing risk more thoroughly as a diverse team, and by identifying new opportunities better than if you don't have diverse teams. And you have a couple of quotes here also about how decision making is improved with gender balanced team. The other topic that they address about what gender balance brings into the company is that gender balance allow improve and accelerated go-to-market and accelerated understanding of the market, and also improved customer relationship. So you have this famous example by Carlos Ghosn of the fact that most of the decision making around cars is made by women. So from the moment he got the study, he decided that 50% of his commercial team would be female. And one that I like also here is Giancarlo Monsellato, who is the former head of Taj, the lawyers firm within Deloitte. He says our customers are ready, and I think that's very important also to state. Because he was told when he took the leadership of Taj that the clients were not ready to have diverse teams, whether by cultural diversity or gender diversity, and he asked his team, so why are you saying that? And he said, well, that's what they've been used to all since we've started working with them. And he decided that they would try. And actually, Taj was one of the lawyers' firm that went through the crisis much better than all the other firms. And to him, that's the reason. The reason for that is that he had a balanced team, gender balanced team in particular. Gender balance and talent, of course. Gender balance company, according to their CEOs, improve the talents attraction, talents retention through welcoming culture and an attracting culture. And this is one very straightforward, but they stress that very heavily. And finally, in a disrupted world, gender balance allows company to enter modernity in a faster way. They often discovered when they entered the company, so Michel Landel says that very nicely. He said, when I joined Sodexo, I was struck by the overwhelming masculinity of the company. So they often discovered an old-fashioned company and oftentimes also dysfunctional. And they used gender balance as a tool to modernize their company. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie-Christine. And so you've heard a lot from us, and now we'd like to hear from you. The question that we have for you, really, listening to the session and thinking about what we've been talking about here, is what are you going to do differently? How are you going to dare? How are you going to impact how you engage? Now, I know there's a big group here, but if actually someone's prepared to be brave and put their hand up and give us some thoughts, we'd be delighted to hear them. And behind me, here we are. So, please give us your thought.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I think the first thing, and I try to do it at home, it's education with our sons. I think that's right to engage men today, but they have their education, their background might be more difficult. But I think somebody mentioned on the stage yesterday that engaging our sons is our first duty as women. If we don't educate our children and explain, so I spend a lot of time by demonstrating to my children what I'm doing. First, they consider it's normal that their mom works, spend time working, and there's a balance between private life and professional life. And I spend time to explain to them all the things I do. It's because even they don't realize all the things we are doing because it's normal, it's mom. So also, sometimes I stop and I said, look, what I've been doing today, all that. And I need your help because you can understand I cannot do everything. And by themselves after, more and more, of course, not when they are babies, but when they are growing, now they are teenagers. And just to stop my comments, but one thing I've used to tell them, just to say, you know, guys, if you are not ready, if you don't help me, if you don't know how to be self-sufficient yourself, you will never find a woman, and I will never get rid of you. So please do something for me.
That's marvelous. That's the best argument I think I've heard all day. Any more, please? Yes.
Thank you. I first want to make an observation maybe of what I saw here. I don't know if it was a survey done with the CAC 40 companies or not. What I noticed is that it was only men. So I think when we start to communicate, we should maybe also show. I know that there is in the CAC 40, if I'm correct, only one woman CEO. Yeah. Maybe she should have a platform to speak. Maybe that's a small observation. And then I'm lucky in my role. I'm doing quite a lot on diversity and inclusion. So what I can do is at least to make a difference in how we are deploying processes throughout the organization in order to make sure that we have a little bit more of a gender balanced story. But it's difficult because I think there's a lot of bias, even among myself sometimes, I realize that. But that's where I think I can make an impact. So I make an impact as part of my role, I would say.
And if you had one tip to give to people from your experience in your role, is there something you would that stands out in your mind as the thing that's the most successful?
Well, I think what I've learned is because there's a lot about what is working now in diversity and inclusion and not. I do think it helps to do awareness sessions on the highest level. If you do not get the commitment of the top management, it's basically a lost cause. So I think we should bring it more on the unconscious bias. This has been proven for me to be a bit more successful because then you really start to realize, hey, I'm doing this and I don't even realize it. With my kids, that's why I liked what the lady over there said before. You educate your kids, so you bring it much closer to them because you talk about their kids, and they also have girls and they have boys. So it's there where it starts, I think.
Thank you.
And can I just add, while the mic is being passed on, I think also the language you use. So within PWN, we consciously talk about gender-balanced leadership. And it's an inclusive debate, right? So men and women are automatically involved, not just about female leadership. That's not an end in itself.
Thank you.
One of the things we do, and I am actually based in Australia, but one of the things that we do is we do a lot of work with working dads. And one of the things they get rather tired about is the fact that there's an assumption made on their behalf that they don't want to be more involved. Yeah. One of the fears that they have is that by being involved, it will be some kind of career limiting move for them. And I think one of the things that we do in our sessions is challenge their thinking about why it is they think that, because often they don't actually have evidence because they haven't tried it. And so until you say, well, what's your evidence for knowing that that is actually the case? They don't know, it's untested. And so they've taken on assumptions or beliefs from other people, often higher up the organization, and recognizing actually they don't hold that opinion themselves. So I think challenging their mindsets is another key thing to do.
Fabulous, thank you very much. We have another one, over there, and then one here.
Perhaps I wanted to share my own experience. I'm heading the gender diversity network in France for HSBC. And in fact, as all the network, we were wondering whether we need to open it to men or not. So we decided long time ago to open it to men, but we only had the believers. So I wanted to extend to beyond that. So we set ourselves some objectives, and basically within the board of the network, we say, okay, we need to find each of us 10 or 15 new members. And I set the scene by saying each male will be double counting the woman. And at the end of the day, not only we increase our number of members by 50%, but we also doubled the 50 for the men. And at the end of the day, you know, it's beneficial for everybody because obviously on our work session, everything is much more balanced, and effectively, managers are also seeing the benefit for them at better understanding and having the global scope of what leadership is and what they need to do.
Thank you very much. Over here.
Thank you. My name is Fiona Jourdan. I'm with the OECD, and I look after women on boards and senior management overall, but also particularly in Asia and in the Middle East and North Africa. And I was surprised to hear this comment about Australia because it's something I'm familiar with in Korea, for example, where they have parental leave, and my God forbid, should a Korean man in that society be seen as actually taking it. So it's actually not being used. But it is interesting because when we look at government, policies and things like this, and you see that, governments are trying to do something in some countries and are trying to motivate change, but then there's a whole cultural dimension that kicks in, and that at the end of the day, it really is about some bold, daring, risk-taking people who, in fact, I can't remember what meeting it was last week, the Secretary General mentioned that we have this UK ambassador who's very young and actually had twins, and at every meeting, he would be leaving at like 5 or something, like, I'm sorry, I've got to go, I'm sorry, I've got to go. And it was really something very unusual at the OECD to see male ambassadors having to leave these important, political meetings. But it sort of just stimulated a thought that, well, really just is very personal sometimes, and it just takes some people to do it for other people to start doing it, etc. And you're just asking what people can do. In 10 days, I'm going to be in Tokyo with a bunch of CEOs from Japanese companies, and we have board diversity on the agenda. I'm sorry that some of you can't be there, but we could certainly use it. And I think one of the things that I tried to do in those sessions is to get men who are like very well revered, the whole gray and 50 years of experience, And then they're the ones who buy into it, and then they're the ones who are talking about it. And then to find, and there are now, more than there were definitely 10 or 15 years ago, some Japanese men, and there's also some role models in Japan who are also women who are starting to show. So little by little, things are moving.
Okay, I think we're almost out of time. There's a hand raised there, so if you'll just bear with us, we'll have this last question. You know, I was hoping to get a comment from a man at some stage, but I realize there aren't very many around here. But you go first, please.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can to give you a minute. But I think that all of us need to be prepared to engage personally with all the men we know. I think we heard from a lot of the sessions this morning about the culture changing, how much is happening at home. And I think there's many, many ways we can try to do through networks and corporations and the ways we're trying to do professionally. But I've found over the years when men hear from women they respect, they admire, they've seen in their mind succeed or manage things, if we can share the differences that we might experience in the workplace, or the comment, the way we feel we're perceived, or the things that have happened that have troubled us. Many men are in that ignorance space. And as many studies as there are, and as many conferences, when you hear it, it hits the head, but not the heart. And I think if we can open ourselves up to perhaps being laughed a little bit, or fun, or going through whatever the ritual is until you get it, I think personal contact in one-on-one or 3, 4, 5-on-1 has a huge impact.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid, sir, we're out of time. If you've got a point to make that's burning, we'll have to get you to come up to us during the break. Thank you so much for your contributions. Hope you found the topic interesting and useful. Hope you've got something to do on Monday when you're back in the office or wherever you're going to be. And if you'd like to know more about PWN or anything that we're doing on Engaging Men, pop your business card in there, or even better, give it to us personally, and we'll be very happy to send you these slides, more reading material, lots of stuff. We'll probably be pounding you for the rest of your life. But anyway, thanks very much once again, and thank you.